It's been an extraordinary year, a terrifying year, a worrying year, but we've been absolutely amazed by the resilience of Oxfordshire community, and we feel very lucky to have been able to play a part in the support going out. To introduce myself, I'm a philanthropist. I am younger generation of the Sainsbury family and inherited wealth when I turned 18. And I knew immediately that I wanted to give away as much as I could. I felt there was a real moral responsibility, having been born with so much good fortune, to give as much as I could. I had a day job in the civil service in the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit, where I was lucky enough to meet my wonderful husband, Will.
In the most romantic possible circumstances, that's in the civil service.
And ever since, we've been running our trust, the Indigo Trust, together. And I think it's something very important that for us, philanthropy isn't just important, it's also one of the most satisfying parts of our lives. We sort of made a promise or a challenge to ourselves when COVID started that we didn't want to look back and wish we could have done more. And that was a real fear, that in future years we'd say lives could have been saved, people could have been helped, but we didn't act, or we didn't act fast enough. So that was really crucial to us. And it's been a real honour to work with OCF on this. I think this has been a really extraordinary time, and perhaps Will can say a bit more about that.
Well, before COVID came along, we had a well-rehearsed strategy for how we were giving money away through Indigo Trust. We didn't believe in giving sort of penny packets, but in making big strategic interventions in a coherent plan that we spent a lot of time working with the wonderful people at the Philanthropy Workshop on. But then, because we both have a background in strategy at a fairly high level, the moment COVID came along and it was suddenly revealed to us the enormity of the crisis, we realised that it was a generation-defining national emergency, and the context in which we'd set our previous strategy had completely changed. So at that moment, we decided, no, we're going to have to make a sudden and rapid departure from our existing strategy and make substantially different interventions nationally and locally. Now, I grew up in an agricultural landscape very much like the one behind me. This is a view from our house up here in the Chilterns. And I know that pockets of great hardship exist in even the wealthiest rural areas around the UK and indeed around Europe. So we made an abrupt strategic shift to change our giving in a way that Fran will now describe. And I should add, giving a Zoom presentation as a husband and wife couple is frankly a nightmare. So forgive us if these handovers and segues don't really work too well. Fran?
No, you're doing great.
Is it all right? Yeah. All right. Okay.
So we knew we wanted to give within the UK and within our own community of Oxfordshire, but it was a new area for us. And although we'd been involved with OCF before, we realised we didn't know anything about disaster response or emergency relief funding. So we wanted to go through an organisation which we knew had the expertise and the knowledge to spend the money well. We also knew how important it is for small charities, which are often, close to the breadline at the best of times, that they didn't have to jump through lots of hurdles or have a year-long application process. They needed the money straight away. So it was crucial for us to give to OCF, and we gave £500,000 within the first month of the crisis, because speed was going to be critical. If we tried to make lots and lots of little grants, it would have taken ages as we did due diligence on charities, try to find ones that perhaps we hadn't heard of. The charities would go bust before we could get the money to them. And we didn't know who were the amazing charities that don't have a national brand, but know where need is in the community and have a real track record, or are doing something really innovative. And we wanted the money to go direct to the communities, not to become a budget line on a much bigger charity. There was a real additionality. We knew our money would make a difference. We wanted to be efficient for the charities, but also it made our lives easier because we had total confidence that by giving through OCF, the money would go to where it was most needed.
We also made national interventions as well. We didn't just see this as a local issue. We gave £1 million to National Emergencies Trust or Fund, I can never remember what it's called, and another £1 million to Trussell and the food banks nationally as well. But for us, as philanthropy is national and local. You have to be rooted in your community to give responsibly and stably at a national and international level. So it was terribly important to make that local intervention to people we trusted absolutely. It was Nick and Adrian and their predecessors and successors, and Jane in particular, who we said, no, we can push to give this money and it will just be distributed rapidly, efficiently and effectively in a way we could never imagine we'd done. And it really was community foundations doing what it says on the tin and standing up at a time of national crisis. And that wonderful video we've just seen just illustrates the very literal good work that's being done on the ground with some of our funds and some of your funds, and hopefully money you are yet to give. And when we talk to local media about this, we normally, we're quite private people, but occasionally we do give media interviews to help the cause. And we always stress that in this enormous crisis that will unroll over the next 2 or 3 years, people should give what they can afford. And we know that wealthy people in Oxfordshire can always afford to give more. There are very efficient tax schemes that enable you to do that quite efficiently and effectively. And so we'd urge anyone who can to think about giving a little bit more in this terrible national crisis.
It's also, it's lovely to see Jane and to be able to thank her for getting us involved in the first place. We're excited to work with Adrian. We feel very lucky that Oxfordshire Community Foundation is our local community foundation, because when we work on the national level of philanthropy, OCF is always mentioned as at the cutting edge of community foundation work. The work we've done with you on data and innovation makes us very proud to see all the work that's going to happen.
I think that's particularly distinctive about OCF as well, is that their work is data driven. So it is based on good evidence of where there is need. And as many of you who give will know, that is distressingly rare in philanthropy. So it gave us particular confidence to give to OCF. I think we're happy to, we've rambled on enough. I think we got away with it though. We're happy to take any questions or just chat things through with anyone who wants to.
Thank you both. I should have said at the start to post questions in the chat box if you have them, because we're quite a large group and managing these virtual gatherings is a bit of a challenge at times, I'm afraid. So do post them in the chat box. I think there is a facility to raise your hand as well if anyone has wants to speak up. But I don't think we have any questions as of yet. So
we have one question, Adrian.
Okay, go for it.
So it's for Fran and Will. How do you see your relationship developing with community foundations into the future, both nationally and within Oxfordshire?
So as you mentioned, Will and I were working on technology policy when we met in the Cabinet Office. And so we have a real interest in data, but information that can help us work better together as donors and across charities. So one of the things we've really been passionate about is working with all community foundations to help them collect and share better information. So UKCF, the umbrella organisation, has really come together on that and is saying, how can we collaborate? How can we share our information? So that's something we're passionate about doing more and more, but also really just spreading the word about how powerful this model is. We talk to American donors quite often, and while community foundations exist there, they are nowhere near as effective and as rooted in communities as the UK foundations are. So it's a model I'd really like to see become better known.
And as one of the key things that the COVID disaster has revealed is the extent of structural inequality in the UK. And we can see the burden of COVID falling far harder on people who are poor and people who are from minority ethnic or religious communities. And so as we look at our next phase of giving, we went through an emergency phase of giving at the outset, get money out of the door as quickly as possible to grassroots organisations with as little overhead as possible. We're now looking at a middle stage of giving in the middle of the crisis. Well, let's hope it's the middle of the crisis anyway, to how can we alleviate some of these structural issues? So how can we give more creatively to work with people on the ground to attack some of the structural issues that prevent proper representation of Black and minority ethnic communities in particular in receiving grants and also being on the boards of organisations and helping run them. And bringing their lived experience to the table to attack structural inequalities. So that's where we're looking at the moment, and we hope community foundations will be able to play a role in that.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
We've probably got time for one more question. So there's one, Fran and Will talked about how they sort of departed from their existing strategy, and the question is, actually now given the time to reflect, do you think that you might revert to some of that strategy, or is it sort of all thrown out the window completely?
So this was actually in addition to our normal strategy. So we decided to make an extra donation of £2 million into the foundation, so that we wouldn't have felt right about cutting off any of the charities we already supported, and that it would have felt like shooting everybody in the foot. So this was in addition, and actually it's brought us into contact with a lot of amazing charities that we didn't already know. So long term, our strategy is the same, but with an added lens. We felt we wanted to give big and give now, but actually the issues Will just mentioned and Adrian mentioned about diversity and equality have really come to light through this work, and so that's something we're following up.
Yeah, strategies should never be fixed. You know, it's an old military paradigm. Very rigid strategies very quickly lead to defeat. You have to constantly evolve them as you're exposed to new information. And in the COVID crisis, we see it as a three-part approach: an initial emergency giving, a middle stage giving, which we're at now, as I just discussed, and then let's say if we ever get there, an after stage as well, a recovery stage. And we're not there yet, and we don't know what that will look like. But the complexity of a mishandled Brexit will doubtless add to suffering in the UK caused by the COVID crisis, and we will see a double hit to the economy and to society, which will be very difficult. Now, we can't kid ourselves, we're big enough grant makers to influence that at a national level, or even actually at a local level. So we have to think very creatively about what we do in that frame.
It's also about wanting these extraordinary charities to survive. When we come through to the other side of this, I don't want us to have lost amazing charities and amazing people. So we do want to get people through this and then say, can we build back better? So amazing small charities that have proven their concept, shown the value to their community, actually we should be doubling down on that, upping the amount of spending after the crisis so that they can do more and more.